You know, you really couldn't script the kind of political drama we're seeing unfold in the Philippines right now. The headline that just jumps out: former President Rodrigo Duterte, he's facing detention by the International Criminal Court right now.
Right.
And he not only ran for mayor of Davao City, but won. Won by an absolute mile.
It's pretty much an unprecedented situation. You have these 2025 midterm elections taking place against this backdrop of really significant political turmoil.
Yeah, turmoil is the word.
We're talking the legal situation around Duterte, the very real possibility of an impeachment trial for the Vice President, Sara Duterte. And, these ongoing tensions, the power struggles between the Marcos and Duterte families, families who were, let's not forget, allies not that long ago.
Exactly. It's complex. So to help us all get a handle on this, we've gathered insights from quite a range of sources for you today.
Yeah, we've looked at reporting from the Philippine Center for Investigative Journalism, PCIJ, the Associated Press, Rappler.
Plus, observations from international monitors, ANFREL, and some broader analysis from places like the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace and HNet.
A good mix.
Our mission really is to cut through the noise of these elections, understand the key things that happened, the challenges, and, importantly, what it all might mean for the Philippines going forward.
Okay, so let's dive right in with that headline result.
Yeah.
Duterte's win in Davao. It wasn't just a win. It was like a landslide, wasn't it?
Absolutely, a landslide. Despite everything going on with the ICC and The Hague, the official numbers show Duterte got over 660,000 votes for mayor.
Wow.
And just for context, the AP reported that's like 8 times the votes his nearest rival got.
8 times. That suggests his support there is still incredibly strong.
Very strong. It certainly seems that way. A very solid base.
And it looks like it wasn't just him. The whole Duterte family seems to have kept a real grip on power there in Davao.
That's definitely a key takeaway from these results. You've got his youngest son, Sebastian, who's the current mayor. He was elected vice mayor.
Okay. His eldest son, Paulo, he won his 3rd term as the House representative for Davao City's 1st district. And even 2 of his grandsons won local posts. Rappler did the math. If the former president serves his full mayoral term, the Duterte family will have held that specific office, the Davao mayoralty, for 37 years.
37 years, with only a small break in between.
Exactly. That's, a powerful demonstration of just how dominant that political dynasty is in a major city like Davao.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, I think. These local wins, strong as they are, seem to ripple outwards, have national implications.
Yeah.
What are the early Senate results showing?
Well, the partial and unofficial results for the Senate race are suggesting a stronger showing for candidates backed by the Dutertes than maybe some of the pre-election surveys predicted.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the AP reported at least 5 candidates allied with them are leading in the count so far. And what's notable is that the polls before the election didn't really capture this level of support. So it suggests there might be this sort of undercurrent of pro-Duterte feeling that could definitely complicate things for President Marcos in the Senate.
And we are seeing Marcos-backed people and opposition people leading too, right? It's a mix.
Yes, it's definitely a mix. Candidates endorsed by Marcos and some opposition figures are also doing well. It really points towards a potentially shifting political landscape at the national level.
And that shift, especially in the Senate, could have a direct impact on Vice President Sara Duterte, couldn't it, with that impeachment trial potentially coming up?
Precisely. That's a connection both the AP and Rappler are making. These midterm results are likely to influence how that impeachment process plays out in the Senate.
Remind us, what are the charges, generally?
Well, there are various accusations, including alleged misuse of public funds, but the key number is this. To remove her, they need a 2/3 vote in the Senate. That's 16 senators out of 24.
16, okay.
So if there's a stronger group of Duterte-aligned senators in there, that could significantly boost her chances of acquittal. It changes the math.
So if we zoom out a bit, look beyond these midterms towards, say, the 2028 presidential election, what are these results hinting at?
Well, Jean Franco, a political science professor quoted by the AP, suggested that these initial Senate results might signal a potential weakening of support for President Marcos. His approval ratings did take a hit back in April.
Right, I remember that.
So this could lead to some, unexpected twists for 2028. Sara Duterte is still widely seen as a strong contender for the presidency, if she gets through this impeachment challenge, of course.
A big if.
A very big if.
Yeah.
But the fracture in the Marcos-Duterte alliance combined with these election results, it definitely paints a picture of a more dynamic, maybe more competitive political scene heading towards 2028.
Okay, let's shift gears a little, away from the horse race aspect, and look at how the elections themselves actually ran. There were new voting machines this time.
Yes, that's right. For 2025, the Philippines used new vote counting machines from a South Korean company, Miru Systems.
Miru Systems, okay.
This was a change, as PCIJ reported, from the Smartmatic machines used in the previous 5 national elections. These new ones use a different kind of optical scanner, which was apparently a key factor after some past issues.
And what did the international observers say? ANFREL, for instance. Sounds like a bit of a mixed bag. Some good things, some problems.
That's a fair summary. ANFREL, they're a regional network focused on democratic elections in Asia. They had observer teams out across the country in about 270 precincts.
Okay.
Their initial take highlighted some positives. They said Comelec, the election commission, made some good efforts on transparency, and citizen participation was high, which is always good to see.
Definitely.
They praised things like the priority polling places for vulnerable voters and early voting auctions, and in most places they watched, polls opened on time, procedures were generally followed.
There's always a but, isn't there? What were the main challenges ANFREL saw?
Yes, they definitely identified several areas needing work. Crowd control was one. And how those priority polling places were actually run on the ground was inconsistent. Well, in some big voting centers, like in Metro Manila or Davao City, there were really long queues, some disorganization. Vulnerable voters weren't always getting clear instructions or the help they needed.
Okay.
They also flagged concerns about ballot secrecy. In many schools used as polling stations, voters were, like, right next to each other.
Not ideal.
No. And they even saw some cases where election staff handled the ballots for voters, which kind of undermines the whole point of verifying your choices privately.
Yeah, that's a serious concern about just voter autonomy.
Yeah.
What about the new machines themselves? Any teething problems?
Technical issues with the machines, the ACMs, were actually the most common problem ANFREL observed. The scanners seemed quite sensitive.
Sensitive, like rejecting ballots.
Exactly. Rejecting ballots, which meant stopping operations to clean the scanners. There were also things like ink smudges causing issues, paper jams, even problems with the cutters for the receipts. All this led to delays and, understandably, voter frustration. ANFREL also mentioned that the timing for ballot verification wasn't always consistent, and that feature where you could scan a QR code on the receipt for extra verification. It wasn't used much.
Oh, why not?
It wasn't entirely clear. Maybe lack of information or promotion. Plus, in a few areas, polls opened late because election materials didn't arrive on time.
And communication within the polling places, was that clear enough for voters?
Apparently not always.
Yeah.
ANFREL noted lack of sort of audible announcements about what to do and confusion about when early voting ended and regular voting began.
Just basic clarity issues.
Yeah, and poor management in the really big centers just led to those long, long queues. They also saw some campaigning happening where it shouldn't have, and people getting unauthorized help to vote.
Okay.
On the plus side, their initial view was that transmitting the results was mostly transparent, though there were some delays reported with servers. They're still watching the canvassing and the random manual audit.
And they had a specific recommendation about overvoting.
Yes. They suggested a thorough review of why ballots were marked as overvoted. Too many candidates chosen. Was it the ballot design? Or maybe the shading threshold on the machines was too strict. Something to look into.
Okay, so definitely a mixed picture on the operational side. Some progress, but clear room for improvement, especially for the voter experience. Now, let's pivot to another theme that always comes up in Philippine elections. Political dynasties. Their influence seems as strong as ever.
Yeah, unfortunately, these midterms seem to have cemented the dominance of political dynasties even further. PCIJ research shows that, for example, every single city in the National Capital Region is currently led by a member of a political clan.
Every single one.
Everyone. We're talking names like Binay, Aguilar, Abalos, familiar political families. And it's not just Metro Manila. PCIJ found that 113 out of 149 cities across the country are controlled by dynasties.
Wow. That's pervasive. And it's not just local government, is it? They're even getting into the party list system now.
That's a really critical point.
Yeah.
The party list system was supposed to give a voice to marginalized groups, right? Farmers, workers, indigenous communities, people who wouldn't normally win district elections.
Right, that was the idea.
But Contradaya, an election watchdog, found, according to PCIJ, that 86 party list groups had links to political dynasties, big business, even the police and military.
86? That's a lot.
It is. And when these powerful families and business interests essentially take over those slots, it really undermines the whole purpose of representing the underrepresented.
And it must make it incredibly tough for anyone new, anyone without those connections or that kind of money to even get a foot in the door. You hear about the spending.
Oh, absolutely. The sheer cost of running for office is a massive barrier. PCIJ, using data from Nielsen Ad Intel, pointed out that candidates like Camille Villar and Amy Marcos spent billions of pesos on ads.
Billions, with a B.
Billions, just on traditional media ads, even before the official campaign period started.
That's staggering.
It is. And groups like the Kilusang Magbubukid ng Pilipinas, a farmers movement, rightly criticize this, saying it just widens the gap, makes politics a playground for the rich. It creates such an uneven playing field. If you don't have deep pockets or that family name, how can you compete? It just reinforces the dynasties.
And there is actually a clause in the Constitution against political dynasties, but nothing's ever really been done about it.
You're exactly right. The Constitution bans them. But Congress has never passed the necessary enabling law to define what a dynasty is and how to enforce the ban.
Why not?
Well, one might argue many in Congress benefit from the current system. PCIJ reported on a recent petition to the Supreme Court trying to force Congress to act. The argument is that not acting violates the Constitution and directly leads to these political monopolies, more inequality, more poverty.
And sadly, alongside dynasties and money, election violence is still a factor too.
Yes, unfortunately. MMF-or-L, the Citizens Election Movement, strongly condemned what they called an alarming rise in election-related violence this cycle. They appealed for peaceful competition, emphasizing violence has no place in democracy.
Did Comelec identify specific problem areas?
Yes. Comelec classified 38 local government units across different regions as red areas, meaning they had grave security concerns. This just highlights that ensuring peaceful elections remains a real challenge in some parts of the country.
Okay, let's talk technology now, specifically the challenge of disinformation. It seems Comelec is trying to tackle this head-on.
They are. They set up a special task force Karohanan and Karapatan at Katarungan sa Halalan. Basically, Task Force Truth, Integrity, and Justice in Elections.
Catchy name.
And its job, as PCIJ reported, is specifically to fight AI-driven disinformation, all that stuff. They're focused on deep fakes, those manipulated videos or audio, but also simpler stuff like cheap fakes and misleading soft fakes.
And they're putting rules on candidates using AI.
Yes, they mandated disclosure. If candidates use AI to create or manipulate campaign content, they have to say so. And they need consent from anyone who's depicted in that manipulated content.
That seems sensible.
Comelec Chair Garcia has been quite vocal about his concerns, saying AI and social media could really undermine election integrity.
But is everyone on board with regulating AI in campaigns? I imagine there are free speech arguments.
Exactly. NEAM-FREL actually objected to the idea of an outright ban on AI in campaigns. They raised freedom of speech concerns.
So what did they suggest instead?
They proposed a code of conduct for candidates using AI, plus those clear disclosure requirements. It really shows the tricky balance, right? How do you regulate new tech in elections without stepping on fundamental rights? It's an ongoing debate.
And, talking about election tech, the Philippines has a bit of a history, a track record of controversies with suppliers, doesn't it?
Unfortunately, yes. PCIJ has covered this extensively. There were those bribery allegations involving the former Comelec chair, Andres Bautista, and executives from Smartmatic back in 2016.
Right, I remember that scandal.
That led Comelec to disqualify Smartmatic initially, though the Supreme Court later overturned that. And now, with the new supplier, Miru Systems, questions are being raised again.
Such as?
Well, issues like a major partner pulling out of their joint venture. And then there were allegations, reported by PCIJ, about suspicious offshore bank deposits linked to a Comelec official.
Oh, dear.
Now, Chair Garcia has strongly denied any wrongdoing, called it insinuation, and asked the Anti-Money Laundering Council to investigate. But these kinds of recurring controversies just highlight how absolutely crucial transparency and accountability are when dealing with election technology procurement.
Absolutely critical. Okay, finally, let's touch on the reactions to former President Duterte's arrest. It sounds incredibly polarized.
Deeply polarized is the right description. Cleo Ann Calambahan, writing for Carnegie, lays this out well. Internationally, the arrest is largely seen as, a step towards justice. especially by human rights groups and victims' families from the drug war era. They've wanted accountability for a long time.
But
Domestically, it's very different. There's still a huge amount of grassroots support for Duterte. You saw protests happening in The Hague, but also across the Philippines, people holding signs like, "We stand with FPRRD, bring him home," that kind of thing.
And there's a specific narrative being pushed online by his supporters.
Yes. The dominant story you see circulating among his base online often frames the arrest as, like, illegal detention, even kidnapping.
Despite the ICC process.
Despite the process. And Kellenbahen points out, Duterte finished his term with incredibly high approval ratings, despite all the controversy. His daughter, VP Sara Duterte, is also still very popular. So there's this feeling among many Filipinos that, their guy is being unfairly targeted.
So what does this deep division, this polarization around Duterte's arrest mean politically going forward?
Well, it could actually consolidate support around his family and their political allies. Kellenbahen makes an interesting comparison to the Marcos family's return to power. It shows that voter memory can be short or selective, and that dedicated supporters can really help bring politicians back even after major controversies. There are also real worries about those disinformation networks, the architects who shaped narratives before, being influential again.
So justice is one thing, political reality another.
Exactly.
Yeah.
While the arrest offers some hope for victims seeking justice, achieving real accountability within the Philippine system is still a massive challenge, given the power and resources of those involved and, the relative strength or weakness of the institutions meant to provide that accountability.
Okay, so as we wrap up this deep dive, it's really clear these Philippine midterm elections were, incredibly complex and fascinating.
Definitely.
You had the Duterte family showing their continued strength in Davao, but maybe a more uncertain picture nationally.
Right.
You had the election process itself, with some steps forward on transparency, but also those persistent operational problems.
Your sheens, the cues, yeah.
The enduring issues of political dynasties and the sheer cost of campaigning are still huge factors.
Looming large, absolutely.
Technology playing that double-edged role, helping run things, but also spreading disinformation.
A constant challenge now.
And then layered over all of it, these intense, polarized reactions to former President Duterte's arrest with potentially big political consequences down the road.
It really highlights this complex mix, doesn't it?
Yeah.
You've got these deep-seated political habits, the electoral system trying to evolve, and technology just accelerating everything.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding how all those pieces fit together is crucial if you want to grasp where Philippine politics is heading. And that has implications beyond just the Philippines, of course.
Absolutely. And on that note, maybe here's a final thought for you, the listener, to mull over. When you look at everything we've discussed, the challenges, the results, the personalities, what do you think will be the most critical factor shaping the Philippines' political future in the next few years? Will it be the dynasties holding on? Will it be efforts to clean up the electoral system? Or is it really all down to the shifting alliances and rivalries between these powerful families?
Yeah, which factor weighs heaviest? Definitely something worth pondering.